You're listening to the ESO Network, your station for all things geek.
Hello and welcome to the 42 Cast, your ultimate answer to fandom, geekiness, and everything. As always, I am your host Nathan, and we have a great episode lined up for you where Brynne Chandler comes on to talk to us about her career in animation and her interest in geeky media throughout her life. Brynne is someone who has worked in animation as a writer since the mid-1980s. She's been involved in series such as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Batman the Animated Series, Gargoyles, and so many more. I mean, seriously, check out her IMDb profile. You'll see a lot of great shows on there. I really appreciated having Brynne on. She was very generous with her time. She talked about growing up, being interested in geeky things, some of the difficulties that she experienced as a female writer, as well as her thoughts on some of the various shows that she's worked on. So I don't want to hold you up from getting to listen to that interview. We're going to pause for a promo from another fine ESO Network podcast. Then we'll come back and have the interview, and then we'll go straight to the ending music after that. So no outros this week. So this is Nathan signing off for this week's recording, even though you're going to hear the interview that's already been recorded. Bye.
Hello, Internet weirdos! If you watched Land of the Lost every Saturday morning, did the Al Jaffe fold-in every month in Mad Magazine, and listened to every song on the Pac-Man Fever album 8,000 times, why, you just might be as weird as us. So join us on the Flopcast. It's a silly podcast for silly people on the ESO Network and at flopcast.net.
And we're back. And like we mentioned at the top of the show, we have with us today Brynne Chandler, who has written many, many things and things that I watched throughout my childhood. So Brynne, welcome to the 42 Cast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's so fun to me to be able to talk to creative people that worked on things that I've loved throughout my life. And as I've looked into your work and looked, I've seen that you've worked on many, many things that I've enjoyed throughout my life. So that is very cool. But just to get started, just have a little bit of background. Where are you from originally?
I grew up in rural New Jersey playing with the cows.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Skating on the lake, all that stuff.
Yeah, I live in Wisconsin now, so I know all about cold and rural.
Yeah.
What were your interests while you were growing up?
Reading, mostly. Anything having to do with words. I loved sports. I was the only girl allowed to play hockey with the boys.
Nice.
Which actually, those skills did well for me when I joined Hollywood.
That makes a lot of sense, and I think we're definitely going to talk about that a little bit more as we.
Yep, I mean, I am definitely a girly girl, and I could not function without my women friends. But I've also spent a lot of time being the only girl on the boys' playground, even on literal playgrounds. So yeah, I was interested in pretty much everything. And I've been a news junkie since I was about 10.
Oh, okay. Yeah, very cool. So what kind of stories did you gravitate towards any particular kind of either genre or a series or anything like that as you were growing up?
I read everything. So there were always books in my parents' house. My two older brothers both read. So when I was too young to understand him, I was reading Hemingway and Faulkner and like that.
Wow.
Dorothy Parker, but I was also reading Heinlein. So I'm not well educated. So there are big gaps and weird crossovers where do you ever read two books back to back or see two movies and they're forever linked in your mind?
Yes.
Yeah, I have a lot of that. And I also, being a curious person, sometimes assume I have the answer or have made the right connection in something when I haven't. Mm-hmm. So it was not until I was in my 30s and already in LA writing television and already had at least one child when I discovered at a dinner party at my own house that Gunga Din is not a poem about baseball. That's the only water boy I'd ever heard of. So yeah, I got to show everyone that piece of ignorance in front of Len Wein and Marv Wolfman, and Jerry Conway was there that night.
So when did you decide that you wanted to be a writer?
I got married at 19 and moved to Houston. The first time I read Theodore Sturgeon, I thought, okay, now I know this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do, and had no idea how to go about it. And it's about that time that I started attending science fiction conventions. And then I met people who were wanting to be writers and who were writing short stories. And I also met people like Robert Silverberg. And that at a convention was where I met Michael Reeves, who I later married. And he gave me my start, or pushed me to start.
So yeah, I'm actually a little curious about that because I know very little about the convention scene, of many decades ago. So I know that Star Trek was kind of like the big, one that sort of started conventions. But were there conventions for other things besides Star Trek, or were these like Star Trek conventions that you were going to?
I think the first one I went to was Star Trek. It was in a supermarket, and I met Walter Koenig there. And after that, I think they were more generally science fiction conventions. But I also remember going to Comic-Con, San Diego Comic-Con, when you could decide on a Saturday to drive down, park at the convention center. I'd generally be one of only 3 or 4 girls there. Huge empty convention halls. You could run into just about anybody. I ran into Harlan Ellison there once, who I already knew, but people of his caliber would just be wandering around. So it was quite a shock. It's shock to the system, to all of us, to all of the writers I know, to see what it turned into.
Sure. I mean, I even know in my lifetime, like cons that are nowhere near as big as Comic-Con. It used to be whatever the guests were. Yeah, they would just be walking around in the hotel or the convention center, and you could just talk to them like, in the hallway. And it wasn't like the thing now where it's like, you only see them when they're at the table. You're not allowed to talk to them, and it's like next.
They charge you for autographs. Yep. I remember going to a convention I think it was a Worldcon in Boston, maybe, but the cast of The Right Stuff was sitting at a table in the middle of the hall, just a big empty space. And, so we're talking Scott Glenn and I don't even know who else. And I was like, we should go take those guys for drinks. We should take them for drinks. And Michael and his best friend, Steve Perry, were like, actors. We don't have anything to say to actors. What an afternoon that would have been.
Yeah, no, definitely. So you mentioned Comic-Con. You mentioned before that you read everything. Did you read comics also when you were younger?
Oh, I loved comics. Oh my God. Especially the Batman and Superman comics of the 60s. Yes. And I loved the EC horror comics.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't care for any of the romances. I have some friends who are romance writers who are wonderful, and I love their books, but generally I want to be around stuff that's blowing up.
Okay. I'm sorry. You kind of remind me of my wife, who is also someone who
excellent.
like she's very much like she's the girly girl and she can cook and sew and do all that, but she absolutely loves action films. Like she doesn't usually want to go to like romance movies or anything. It's just like she's like her name is Beth and she says Bethy likes Big Boom.
Absolutely. I will. She sounds like my kind of woman. I will sit on the floor with a towel spread out and give myself a full manicure, pedicure, color my hair, everything while I'm watching the Avengers.
That's great. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So was there anything particular about animation that you felt like you wanted to go in that direction, or was it just like circumstances aligned where that was where you were able to get like a writing gig?
It was pure luck, serendipity. My first marriage did not last, and I met Michael and moved to LA and was going to be a novelist. I wanted to write novels. And Arthur Nadell from Filmation called Michael, I think a month after I moved in with him, and said he had this new show called He-Man. Did Michael want to write for it? And Michael said, yeah, sure, but I have a new writer here. Can we get her something? And Arthur Nadell said, well, if you get me a script by Friday, I will read it over the weekend and I'll let you know. So that was Wednesday afternoon.
No pressure.
I had never written a word in my life. So I had some kind of Apple computer with an IBM Selectronic as the printer. And Michael helped me come up with a story and an outline. And I typed in 2 16-hour stretches with like 2 hours in between. And I'd run into Michael's it was a 450 square foot apartment. So I'd run into his little office alcove and say, what is it? How do you describe it when a spaceship goes whoosh through the scene? And this was so long ago, he'd say Xerox. It Xeroxes through scene, because that was the process they used to make the, I don't know what you'd call it, visual Doppler. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so we got it all finished. Friday, middle of the day, we tried to print it out. Printer won't work. It's absolutely will not work. We cannot get the script out of the machine. So we were living in West Hollywood then. We put the entire computer and typewriter in the car, drove it to Northridge where Diane Duane lived, and because she knew how to deal with computers from the early 70s. And she got it to work. We printed it out. We took it to Arthur. I chatted with him for a few minutes. Monday morning, he called and said probably one of my favorite compliments I've ever gotten as a writer. He said, tell me the truth, Michael, did you write this yourself? So he bought it and they produced it, and that was the start.
So one of the things that I wondered, and this might vary from series to series, and I know you've worked on quite a few, do they have like a writer's room where it's like a staple of writer? I mean, obviously they'll take some from other, but okay. So no, that's not like a standard thing.
Not in my experience. Now, my fella, Ken Scott, he's an award-winning animation writer in Canada, and they have had writers' rooms. I have been in what they call cattle calls, where they know they have 12 episodes, or at that time 65 episodes they wanted to do, and you'd all be in the room together pitching, and I never did that. They just, by the time they needed that many writers, I had been writing long enough that I didn't have to go to those. My agent would say, yeah, you can have her. She's going to cost this much. And what's our minimum? Are you going to give her a minimum of 3, a minimum of 5, 1 with an option for 2 more, or how are we going to do this? So I never had to go to those. And I never sat in a writer's room like on a sitcom. I have a friend who was a protege of Linda Bloodworth Thomason, and she told me such horror stories about writers' rooms, especially, she was often the only girl in the room. She was on Cheers. She was on she was one of the million writers that Roseanne fired. She got an adorable note from Tom Arnold apologizing. It was written on a paper towel. And listening to her stories about what those kind of rooms were like, that's why I never tried to get into into live action television or movies. Because I don't play well with others. I don't want to do anything by committee.
So He-Man, and I get this is your first opportunity to get into writing, but it's a very masculine sort of boy-oriented show. And I mean, I realize that you mentioned that you did play with the boys when you were growing up. So working on something like that versus I know you were a story editor on My Little Pony, which is much more of a girl-like focused show. I'm kind of curious, like, how you feel about shows being pitched that way. And do you feel like sort of like an unnatural thing to like sort of create this distinction of, only boys should be watching this, only girls should be watching this?
Yeah.
Especially you being a woman who was working in, a lot of these shows that were boy focused, I'm kind of curious, like, what your thoughts are, on that.
No, I hate that stuff. I raised a daughter and 2 sons, and I think that there are more differences between individuals than there are similarities between genders. And I'm being very binary right now because I'm not sure I have the vocabulary not to be, but advertising is binary. It's boy. Children's advertising is binary. It's a boy thing or it's a girl thing. It's pink or it has spikes on it. I mean, and I hated that. So when I was writing on He-Man, I never thought, I didn't have kids yet. But I never thought about, am I writing for girls or am I writing for boys? And it never occurred to me that girls wouldn't want to see heroes flying around. Who wouldn't want to see heroes flying around? And My Little Pony, again, I didn't think of it as being for girls. It was just adventures. I get irritated when I loved the movie Moana. I loved that movie. And I've had so many people say to me, oh, my sons won't watch that. And I'm like, sit their little behinds down. Make them. Don't let them get away with that.
My daughter was bullied when she was in kindergarten for having a Spider-Man backpack. So this is kind of near and dear to my heart. That's an issue.
If I had known you then, I would have shown up with Stan Lee and we would have fixed it.
Did you meet Stan?
Oh, yeah. I worked with Stan on an episode of Spider-Man.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Yeah. He was a sweet, sweet man.
Yeah. Everything that I hear about him, it sounds like he was amazing. Yeah.
Yep. He absolutely would have gone to her school and given all the kids the speech on how nobody's really different.
So that being said, were there elements about He-Man that appealed to you?
Well, all of it. I mean, he's riding around on a giant tiger. Who wouldn't? Of course. And I have less fondness for some of the villains, although I love Skeletor. But Arthur Nadell spoiled me far past rotten. He would call people in, like for a cattle call, he'd call people in for a pitch meeting, and there'd be 5 or 6 writers there, and he would start the meeting by welcoming us and whatever, and he'd say, okay, Brynne, can you come up with a story where, I don't know, Teela has an evil twin sister, or whatever the basic springboard was. And I'd say, sure. And he'd say, okay, you can go. And he never made me pitch in front of anyone else. He never put me on the spot. He never made me compete with anybody else. He just let me go do my thing. And I'm probably one of the few writers on the planet who had that kind of experience with a producer.
Well, that is very nice.
It was wonderful. Well, he had daughters my age. And that does make a difference.
One of the things that I found when I was looking through your work and everything was that you had written a novel called The Dream Palace.
Yeah.
And what I read about it was that it was a game book / novel. And so I'm kind of curious, what does that mean exactly?
Oh, the publisher, the editor, came to me and asked if I was interested in doing that because it was this idea that they had. And it was a book that you could either read straight through or you could play it like a choose your own adventure novel.
Oh, I see.
So you'd get to a point and you'd have to choose to do this or that. And if you choose to do this, you keep reading. If you choose to do that, you jump ahead to the asterisk on page 37. And that's how it was all put together. And I didn't do this on purpose, but apparently somebody reviewed it. Somebody weird, like Popular Mechanics or somebody, not a normal review place, reviewed it and loved the fact that all of the choices are moral choices. And I did not do that on purpose. That was not anything that I was trying to lead anyone or teach anyone. It seems to me that if a little spider had a crushed leg and you could pick it up and keep it safe, or you could step on it, I figured you should pick it up and keep it safe. It just made sense to me. So, yeah, but they came to me for that.
Okay.
And then the editor left to do other things. And I mean, to be an editor at a bigger publishing house. And there was supposed to be a sequel, but the new editor they gave me was not someone I could work with. Their ideas of what the characters should be and everything else were just not in line with anything that I was willing to do. It was very much, I was trying to twist tropes or do a different play on a trope or whatever. And she wanted everything to be as clear as the characters in The Breakfast Club. And I was not willing to go there.
Yeah. Well, why make something interesting for your readers and change things up from their expectations?
Yeah. So, yeah, but it was fun.
I'm going to obviously have to skip around a little bit in time because if we talked about everything, then it would be a very, very long interview. But I do have a question, and this is kind of a small show that I remember from my childhood. You worked on a show called Dino Saucers.
Yes, I did.
That was one of the weirdest concepts that I think that I ever saw when I was younger. And I'm just curious, do you know where that came? Like, I don't know if you were involved in the creation or beginning of it or anything, but do you know where that idea came from?
I know exactly where it came from. That was the brainchild of Michael Uslan, who I believe at one point owned the Batman franchise.
Oh, like the 66 Batman franchise?
No, I mean the whole intellectual property.
Oh, okay.
Or was it, or he was the one who had the rights to make stuff. You'd have to Google him. I just know that he was a far bigger deal than I knew he was. And he was crazy. That show, we did 65 half hours. I story edited with Diane Duane, but we each had our own episodes. And I think I did 32 episodes in 4 months, which is unheard of. I had to turn in 3 final scripts every Wednesday. Whereas if you listen to Wiseman talk about Gargoyles, he'll go on and on about how we had to turn in 2 scripts a month. It was crazy. It was crazy. So we didn't do outlines. And Michael Uslan fancied himself a writer, and he would give me 2 pages written and illustrated on yellow lined notebook paper, and I had to turn it into a script. One time he gave me the entire Who's on First routine, and I didn't have time to sit him down and explain anything to him, so I just incorporated it in the script, and that was the first time I was ever screamed at by Disney lawyers.
Of course, you worked on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which was a huge property for many, many years.
Yeah.
And of course, it's still going on, but I don't think it's quite as huge as it used to be.
No.
But yeah, how did you get involved with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles?
David Wise was the story editor. It's David who made the Turtles what they are, because if you've ever read the comic book, there was no cowabunga in there. And David was the first person I met when I moved to LA. Michael picked me up at the airport And we went straight to David's house from the airport to pay him for a television we were buying, which was the same model that they used in Poltergeist.
That's an interesting association.
Yeah, well, it is. It sat on the floor and so there you go. But yeah, so I had known David for a long time. And when he was made story editor on the show, the first people called were Michael and me.
Oh, okay, cool. Was there anything about the Turtles that appealed to you specifically?
Well, I liked their personalities. I loved having them running around in the sewers. My middle kid used to follow a guy who did a podcast that had, he talked about animation, stuff like that. And they did a contest of all the flavors of pizza mentioned on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And they voted mine the one they liked best. And I do not remember what it was. I think there were marshmallows on it. I'm not sure. But writing animation in the 80s, it was raining soup. There was too much work for people. So you really somebody would call and say, hey, I have a show, you want to come play? And you'd say, yeah. And it's not like I sat around going, what's on that I would like to write for, or what? I mean, my career might have been different if I had been picky, but somebody said, hey, you want to do some episodes? I said, yeah. The only thing, I never turned anything down. And the only thing Michael ever turned down was G.I. Joe.
And why did he turn down G.I. Joe? Because
he was number one in the draft for Vietnam, and he starved himself down to about 80 pounds and then had to maintain it while the legality of the draft went through the court system. So he was rabidly anti-war, very much anti-gun. So yeah, that's the only one that he ever didn't do, which is kind of funny because you can't say that he never wrote anything where people were shooting at each other, but it wasn't bullets. Except in the great episode of Gargoyles that he did, Deadly Force.
Right. So you're working on the show Turtles, and what do you think about the sort of phenomenon? Because I mean, Turtle Mania was huge in the late 80s, early 90s and everything. What did you think about all that going on?
By the time Turtles went on the air, I was on to the next thing because there's such a long lead time. So He-Man was huge too. And I just knew kids liked cartoons, but it didn't have any impact on my life. We don't get residuals for any of that stuff. We certainly didn't get any toy money. We didn't get money for creating characters. I wasn't recognized on the street or anything like that. So it didn't really have an impact. Yeah, I think I was kind of insulated from all of that because by that time I was raising kids. They'll keep you busy.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I understand that completely.
Yeah.
So you had mentioned working on animation in the 80s, but transitioning into the 90s here. Did you feel that, because I guess I'll front load this question a little bit. As someone who was growing up during that time, to me, it felt like there was a definite move in the 90s across quite a few different shows to sort of elevate the level of storytelling. And I'm just curious for you as a writer, did you feel that that was a thing that was perceptive to you, that maybe before you were writing for kids that were maybe in the single digits and now maybe you were writing for young teens kind of level?
Most of the men that I knew who were really writing for each other. They really were, which is fine because they wrote great stuff. I think that why that happened is that so many who started out in the 80s doing things like My Little Pony and whatever got more comfortable with the form. After you've been doing it for 10 years, you start looking for ways to push and to expand. And as your writing skills become more sophisticated, your stories become more sophisticated. That's just how it works. And many of the people like Michael, like Bob Skier, like David Wise, now had the power to be more in charge of the stories. because they were story editing and producing and whatever. They weren't just writers for hire. So I think it's a natural effect that it would get more sophisticated. I mean, look at the difference between sitcoms in the 50s and sitcoms in the 60s.
No, that's fair. I mean, I hadn't thought about it that way before.
Yeah.
But as we're going to move on now to talk about Batman the Animated Series, I feel like that and several other shows that came out around the same time seem to be definite steps into telling, like you said, more sophisticated stories. Yep. I also really like Pirates of Dark Water, X-Men.
Oh, my daughter loved that. I would have killed to write for Pirates of Dark Water.
But those were shows that were playing around with things like story arcs and serialization, you know, like serialized storytelling and all that kind of stuff, and telling stories that were maybe a little bit more gritty, a little bit more violent, but to serve the story, not just for gratuitous, like laser blasts everywhere kind of stuff.
Well, and a lot of that I do have to give credit to the person who was most influential on Fox Kids TV was Sidney Iwanter. And Sidney, he's got an enormous collection of children's books and has a good instinctive understanding of story. And he pushed, especially on Batman, he pushed for those more sophisticated stories.
Well, yeah, it was like kind of amazing on Batman that they would actually use like real guns.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of shows before that, it was all laser guns, right? Like you couldn't actually show a real gun on the show. But I always feel like, and of course, you know, when we talk about Gargoyles, that's there too. But showing guns and real guns is actually a more powerful message to kids about the dangers of guns rather than having like the laser guns.
I grew up in the early 60s and all kids played cowboys and Indians, which all racial insensitivity aside, even if kids were running around, I always felt that if I let my sons and my daughter run around and play with guns, they would outgrow them. These are toys for little kids. Grown-ups don't play with these. Grown-ups don't need these. And that's pretty much what happened.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And I always thought it was silly when people would be like, oh, no, kids can't see guns. They've got to be late. And like, first of all, it still has a trigger and it shoots, right? Like, I mean, like, so if you're really trying to get kids to not even know about the concept of a gun, that's out the window. But yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a more powerful message if it looks like the thing that's the real thing.
All sort of child raising theories are cyclical. And we went from when I was growing up, we were free range children. You got thrown in the summer, your mother threw you out the door as soon as she could get breakfast in you. And in my neighborhood, you came home when the 6 o'clock whistle blew from the firehouse. And during the 80s, and especially with Reagan's yuppies, there was this weird romanticization of and sentimentalization of little kids that, oh, they can't see Grimm's fairy tale and seeing a Barbie doll is going to give her body complexes and all this stuff. And so they raised a whole generation completely removed from reality and not really able to regulate their emotions because no one ever said no to them. And that's a wild generalization, but I lived through it and I was writing for children during it and I saw it. I saw it in the executives. I saw it in the advertising executives and in the differences between the way they talked about kids and the way someone like Arthur Nadell did. And there also with it came sort of a lack of respect for their intellect. Kids won't understand. I remember when I was at Deke working on Starcom, I used the word laser and someone said, kids won't understand the word laser. And my first response to that always was, mine do. And their answer was, well, that's yours. But then I pointed out that the kids that were watching Starcom had never lived in a world without Star Trek or Star Wars. Of course they knew what a laser was. They knew what a phaser was. They knew what a tractor beam was. But I don't know if the executives got dumber or just this weird romanticizing of children happened. And it was like, no, they're delicate. And if they see one word they don't understand, they will change the channel.
Yeah, I feel like I came in right at the boundary of that switchover because I grew up the same way you're talking about, where like we just wandered around the neighborhood with other kids and we played games, played in the woods, did all that stuff and came home. But as I'm growing up, I'm seeing all this push, like you can't say kill on cartoons. You have to say destroy because that's like a euphemism and stuff like that. And I was always like, I am not like a traumatized individual because I grew up watching Star Trek from the time I was like 3 or 4 and people are getting gunned down, by phaser fire and whatever. And it didn't traumatize me. And in fact, I still think that learning about things like that when you're young and at home is better than encountering them at the real world at some point, because it's kind of like, oh, this is a safe space to learn about concepts like, yeah, there are bad people out there and they might want to harm you and stuff like that, rather than trying to hide all reference to anything like that from children.
I grew up on things like combat. I grew up actually watching the Vietnam War in my living room on the news at night. I grew up with Life magazine. I remember, I will never forget seeing the photo of that naked little girl who'd just been napalmed running down the street. You couldn't print that in a newspaper now. You couldn't. And this is what fairy tales were for. It allows children to deal with things like mortality and death, and little kids can be quite vicious. It helps them to deal with their own unhealthy impulses, unrealistic impulses, stuff like that. When they're 2 or 3, before puberty and hormones come in, it is no accident, and no one will ever convince me I'm wrong about this. It is no accident that my generation, who grew up with combat, who grew up with Bugs Bunny, who grew up with the real fairy tales, all that stuff, Bambi, for God's sake, Bambi. We grew up with all of that. My generation stopped the Vietnam War. The first generation to grow up with the sanitized stuff that we were forced to write brought us slasher movies, because all of those impulses and fascinations and all of that stuff, that has to be dealt with in order to grow up as a human being. And I personally would rather have dealing with it with 2 and 3 and 4-year-olds that I can pick up and put in air jail than teenage boys who know where to get guns. So that's end lecture, end rant. But I've been going on about this since the late 70s.
Oh, I do consider it a sort of validation to hear that from you as well, because you're kind of speaking the same language that I've been speaking for a while.
Yeah.
And it's funny though, because I did also have I've interviewed Eric Lewald, and he did talk about getting the chance to be a showrunner on X-Men and about being able to finally tell stories like he wanted to, which kind of speaks to what you were saying about.
Exactly. Eric's great.
Once you have the ability to drive the story, you can sort of drive the story towards more of what you would like to yourself see. And so, that's why X-Men was also a very sophisticated show.
It was. My daughter loved it. I think Michael and I were exclusive somewhere else, so neither of us got to write for it. But we would have jumped in there with both feet if we'd been allowed to.
Yeah. But talking about Batman, was that another situation where it's just because your name was known, it was sort of just offered, like, do you want to work on Batman?
Well, yeah, they wanted Michael to story edit, and he wanted me to write, because that was one of the things that we were a very small, tight group of writers that easily moved between, okay, I'm going to story edit, I'm going to hire these 8 people. Okay, one of those 8 people is going to story edit, they're going to hire the other, and we moved back and forth between boss and writer very easily. And we had to take decent care of each other, because if you were mean to me in the studio on Monday, I'm sitting at a dinner table with my wife that Friday, and it won't go well for anyone. So we were very close and tight knit. So yeah, when Michael got the story editor gig on Batman, of course he wanted me to do some episodes.
So does that mean, like, was Michael coming up with, hey, I want a story about X, and could you write that? Or did you get to pitch, like, I want to do a story about X?
I think it was a combination. I think Alan Burnett had some things he wanted to write about, because I don't think I would have come up with Hardak on my own.
That was going to be one of my questions, is where Hardak came from.
No. Also, Alan had it in his head that I could only write Batgirl stories.
I was going to ask about that also. So that was something that was assigned to you. That wasn't you saying, like, I want to bring Batgirl into Batman.
No, I would have. If nobody else had said it, I would have said it. But they decided that they needed Batgirl. They decided they needed a girl to write her. And they decided that I was not allowed to write for anybody else. I didn't get to write for the Joker. I did get to do a Penguin episode and was not happy with how they changed the ending. But yeah, so I was their Batgirl person, and I fought as hard as I could to make her as strong as I could make her, and as not impressed with Batman as I could make her, as, all that stuff. And she got watered down a lot, but I hear fans say that they still think she was a good version of the character. So that makes me happy.
Well, yeah, I mean, in Heart of Steel, I really like how, this is before she becomes Batgirl, I really like how intelligent Barbara comes off in that story, and is able to figure stuff out, and she's able to break in, and it's all using just normal everyday stuff. She doesn't have the access to the millions that Bruce Wayne has and everything, and I really appreciated that, and the sort of slow, because like I was talking about, like, Batman's coming in at the beginning of what I felt to be a move in sophistication within animation, so having like a character arc was kind of unheard of in cartoons at that point.
Yeah.
And to see Barbara sort of slowly develop over the course of like 5 episodes or so was actually like a really cool thing for me to watch happen. And so I really appreciated how that was done.
Yeah.
So were you told up front that you would be writing more episodes with Barbara, or was it just kind of like you were handed Heart of Steel, you did that, and then later on you were handed the story where she becomes Batgirl, and etc.?
I think it was kind of more organic like that, because with Michael story editing, it's what we talked about at the dinner table. So he'd say, all right, I just finished, Bob Skier wrote this episode, and now you're going to do this one. And the next one we need to do, Alan wants you to do another Batgirl in a week or whatever. However, it was organic. It was just, we were both working on the show, and nothing was very formal. I mean, we had contracts and everything. It was professional. We were married and raising kids together, and we never really collaborated as such, because I don't play well with others, and Michael certainly didn't. So it was easier if we knew who was in charge. If he was the story editor, I took notes from him. If I was the story editor, he took notes from me. Doesn't mean we didn't argue about them. Apparently, when Alan and I were working out one of the Batgirl stories, he was the producer, and I don't believe he'd ever had a writer say to him, no, I don't want to do that. But if I don't know how to make something work, I'm going to give you a better idea. I worked hard to learn my craft. And if I said I have a better idea, I could give you 8 reasons why it's a better idea. And if you give me something that doesn't work, I can give you 8 reasons why it doesn't work. And that's not just me, that's any writer who really knows their craft. And doing as many episodes as we all did in the 80s and 90s, these are people who know their craft inside and out, which is why it makes me crazy that none of us can get on a superhero movie.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised when Marvel brought X-Men back and doesn't have any of the original writers writing for it. I realized that Eric is like a consultant or something on it, but yeah, so I was like, well, they're the ones that made the show work in the first place. Why aren't you having them do the new show?
Well, didn't they just try to do that with Animaniacs?
Oh yeah, Animaniacs came back also, right, correct.
Yeah, Tom Ruegger has something like 17 Emmys I mean, I forget whether it's 13 or 17, but it's double digit Emmys. He's also one of the funniest human beings on the planet. And they couldn't bring him back. It makes no sense to me.
Yeah, no, I totally hear you on that, because I mean, me as somebody who was watching all these things that you and these other writers created, I would love to see you working on the things that are the same properties, but in live action. Because I feel like the characters and what makes those characters great. So, why aren't you the ones? Whereas now it seems like it's very hit or miss, because it's like maybe they pull a writer that does a good job with the character. Maybe they don't. A lot of movies I feel like have been flops because the people writing it didn't understand the character.
Yep. Well, that's one of the things that makes me craziest about Batman is, God, my middle kid who wrote for Screen Rant about comic books had to practically sit on me when I stumbled across Batman versus Superman. I was fixing to jump out our second story window rather than continue watching this movie. The rage I feel that these stupid little white boys don't understand that Batman is not closed down because he's a raging psychopath. He's closed down because if he let even one crack show to let his compassion out, it will overwhelm him. It's not that he doesn't feel anything, it's that he feels everything all at once. And he protects Gotham City, not because he likes to beat up criminals. He does it so that no little boy or girl or anyone else ever has to feel what he felt in the alley that night. And they don't get it. And they don't get why people don't flock to their versions more than just the manosphere and the bros. And they don't get it. And it's infuriating.
Yeah, myself and some people I've had on the show have had some choice words about that film, so it's been discussed.
Oh, God.
But yes, I believe that as far as an example of somebody really not getting the characters, I think Zack Snyder and the DC characters is a perfect example of a man who just doesn't get it.
Martha Kent saying, "You owe these people nothing." She was given a son with the powers of a god, and she raised him to have the morals of a saint. And she's going to say, "You owe them nothing." It made me insane.
Yeah.
I didn't like the new Superman movie either, but I didn't hate it. I didn't hate it to that level.
Yeah, the Zack Snyder's Man of Steel, where Pa Kent tells him that he should have let a bus full of kids die because maybe somebody would have discovered him. And it's like, do you know what Superman is?
Yeah, that's the example my middle kid gives all the time.
Right.
Yep. God.
But you had just mentioned that you felt like Batgirl was watered down. So can you think of anything specifically that you wanted that was kind of like taken away from the character?
Yeah. In one of the episodes, she used the bat signal to get Batman up on the roof. And he isn't going to promise to help her. He doesn't believe her that Gordon has been replaced by something. And so I had him turn to leave, and then he stops and he kind of turns back slowly, and we see that she's got her feet planted and she's got his cape in both hands. And she's like, "You have to believe me. You have to help my father. He's your friend. You have to help me." And he says, "I'll see what I can do." And she makes a show of opening her hands so that he can leave. And though they wanted no part of that, no part of that. And that made me mad. And then, do you remember the movie Lethal Weapon?
Funny enough, it's one of the weird gaps in I never watched it.
Okay, there's a great scene in Lethal Weapon at the end where Murtaugh and Riggs, Mel Gibson, there's this big bare chest fight on the lawn in the rain between Mel Gibson and the bad guy. And at the end of it, he beats up the bad guy and he kind of crawls to Murtaugh and crawls up him, and there is collapsed in his arms, all bloody and beaten. And the bad guy is dragged to his feet, and he grabs a gun off a cop and aims it at them. And Murtaugh and Riggs at the same time, in matching silhouette, grab guns and turn with their arms extended in parallel. And Murtaugh is kind of got his coat draped over Riggs's bare shoulder, and they both fire. So I had Batman and Batgirl end a fight scene flinging batarangs that same way, where he's got his cape half around her, but they are equals throwing the batarangs to cut a rope or do whatever, because you can't impale a bad guy. But whatever. No, they couldn't have that either. They have, I don't know, Barbara Tripp or something, and Batman throws the batarang over her head. It was just, give her her moments. Give them to her.
I'm betting that's the Shadow of the Bat episodes, and I haven't. So I'm rewatching Batman actually right now with my youngest daughter, and we haven't gotten up to that one yet. It's been a few years since I've seen the whole show.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever seen all of them. When my kids were little and they'd be watching Batman or Gargoyles or whatever, I'd walk through the room and be like, that's a really great piece of dialogue. They'd be like, yeah, that's you, Mom. Or I'd be like, that is a stupid scene. What is happening? They'd be like, that's you, Mom.
You also mentioned the one that you had with the Penguin. The ending was changed on that. So what was your original ending?
All through the whole thing, the society people keep saying, not our kind, dear. And at the end of it, the society lady gets arrested and the Penguin also gets arrested. And Batman, in my version, and Batman's loading the Penguin into the van, and he looks at whatever her name was, Veronica DeVries, whatever it was. And the Penguin says, I can't believe you didn't take her side. And Batman just says, she's not our kind, dear. And they cut it.
Oh, I like that. I think that would have worked.
Well, because they are, none of them could exist without the others. I mean, Batman and Joker are the biggest two sides of the same coin. Most people just don't get what the sides are. But the Joker would die without Batman's attention. And Batman needs Joker to remind him what he cannot become.
Yeah. But as a Batman fan, one thing that I would like to know, because you were growing up reading Batman comic, was there someone that you wanted to write for that you didn't get a chance because you were mostly doing the Batgirl storylines?
I would have liked to have tried my hand at the Joker. I would have liked to have a chance to play, to see what I could bring to that. I used to have a small writing group here in Phoenix that was disbanded because of COVID, but we used to give each other prompts. And one of the prompts was a black and white photo of an alley, and standing in the middle of the alley is a wreath of red roses, like a funeral wreath, and it's the only thing in color. And so I looked at that and thought, well, this is Batman's story. Of course it's a Batman story. So I did write a very short story with Batman, the Joker, and Harley Quinn and Alfred. And I thought I did really well. So it'll never see the light of day, most likely. But I didn't use anybody's names. I just called them the Bat, the Clown, the Butler, and the Girl. But yeah, so I would have liked to try Joker. I have no interest in Harvey Dent. It might have been fun to do a Harvey Bullock story, because he was an interesting character. Mike always had an interesting take on him. But yeah, no, I really regret that I never got to write for Superman.
Yeah, I mean, there was the Superman animated series in the late 90s. Was that just you weren't offered the work on that?
I did write 2 episodes of Iron Man, and I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea who Iron Man was. I'd never even heard of him. And I kind of wish I had a chance to go back and do that again, because after the Marvel movies, he's fun. He'd be fun to write for.
Yeah, so I mean, you had mentioned before about Stan Lee and working on Spider-Man, which is also on Fox Kids.
So that was Sydney.
So was that something where, because you had mentioned you had really been into Batman and Superman, but some of the characters that you were using, did you reference comics for the black costume and the denim and stuff, or were you sort of given character briefs?
No, they gave me character sketches and stuff like that.
Okay.
That was That was a nightmare. John Semper, who was the story editor, Avi Arad, who was one of the executive producers, hated John Semper, hated Stan Lee, hated Sidney Iwaner, who was the exec at the time. I think John hated everybody. Sidney hated me. It was just, I walked into the meeting because what they had you do is the only show I ever had to do this on until I worked for John again recently on Weather Hunters. But they would make the writer come in and read the script out loud and give notes on every line. So John caught me just before we went into the meeting and said, okay, these are the Avi's here, Stan's here, Sidney's here, and Sidney just announced to the room that he's going to make you cry. And I said, yeah, okay. So I went in and I read the room and I realized that I needed an ally other than John. So I went full on suburban mom with Stan Lee. And he was wearing a navy blue crew neck sweater and a pink shirt. And while we were all settling in, he took the sweater off and he was making a big deal that there were little blue fuzzballs all over his shirt. And the men were ignoring him. And finally he caught my eye and I said, Stan, is it bleeding, honey? And he said, no. And I said, if it's not bleeding, it's not important. Now let's move on. And he was in the palm of my hand from that moment. And he protected me from them trying to get under my skin. And decades later, the last time I went to Comic-Con a couple years ago, I was telling that story, and John Semper said that he has Avi Arad on tape saying, I hate this show. The best work on this show is being done by a girl.
Well, that's a nice validation.
It is. So that was probably the hardest episode of anything I've ever written, except She-Ra. I could not get, nobody I knew who wrote for She-Ra could get their mind wrapped around what the show was. We just couldn't understand it. And now when I see the remake, it's like, well, now it makes sense. This is a brilliant take on it. This is gorgeous.
Oh. One of the other episodes you worked on for Spider-Man was the Morbius episode, where they greatly changed Morbius. You know, in the comics, he's more of a classical, even though he's not a vampire per se, because he's a human with bat DNA, but he basically is like a vampire in that he sucks blood from his teeth and everything. And they made this big change where like he's got like suction cups on his hand.
Oh.
And they talk about that it's he doesn't drink blood, he drinks plasma, which of course is like, okay, well,
I remember that. Yeah.
And so what do you think about that kind of thing? I mean, I think it's kind of like what we were talking about with guns, but what do you think about that kind of thing to try to protect children from the idea of a vampire and turning it into something like that?
I think it's ridiculous, but you know, they're paying you a ton of money. And I believe I did that episode after the first one, and I either I have completely blocked it from my mind, or I didn't have to go through the same process.
Oh, okay.
The next time, because I don't. The first one is so vivid in my mind, and the second one, I just remember going home, writing the script, giving it to John, getting notes, doing the rewrite, and we were done. So. I don't know if they straightened their process out or what happened, or if they were all just as exhausted as I was. But yeah, changes like that are goofy.
Yeah, although, I mean, it might be, and this is just me remembering from years ago, because I used to read Wizard Magazine, which was like the magazine on the comic book industry, and they would talk about the animated projects and everything too. My understanding was John had to take over that first season on short notice, that there had been somebody else as the showrunner originally, so they might have had more scrutiny in that first season just because of the fact of they were trying to take over something that was kind of crashing.
Exactly. And this is how versatile so many of the animation writers were during that time, is that John did Spider-Man, but he's even better known for Fraggle Rock. And that's and now the last show he did was Weather Hunters for PBS, which was created by Al Roker. I did one episode of that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I didn't know about that. I see, because I subscribe to John's Facebook feed, so I see things that he posts and whatnot. But yeah, I didn't realize that he had a show on PBS, because my kids have kind of aged out of PBS now.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So Gargoyles, which, just to front load again, is kind of to me pinnacle of animation. That's a show where, I talk about like I haven't seen Batman in a while and whatnot. Gargoyles is a show I've rewatched and watched over and over my whole life, just because I felt like that's just such an interesting story and so much more developed. Sophisticated was the word you used. I like that. It's more sophisticated than anything else I can recall, or even newer stuff on animation. There's some shows that are getting close to that a little bit. I feel like Gargoyles at a level of sophistication that, is kind of unmatched. So we talked about how, like, you're kind of working just on what came your way. But Gargoyles specifically, is there anything that you found really interesting or gripping about Gargoyles as a concept?
Mainly, Michael was hired to completely rewrite the 5-part pilot because Greg had been trying to sell it for years, and it started out as funny animals and nobody could get it. So Batman had just ended and Michael was not ready for Batman to be over. So he just brought Gargoyles as close to Batman as he could get it. And that's, to me, I think that's who should really get most of the credit. We did not part ways, best of friends, but Michael and I, but he brought the darkness and the edge to it. He really did, because he wasn't done with Batman. And that's, as a writer, that's what you get to do.
Right.
So when Disney finally approved the pilot, they asked him to story edit, and I was the first one he hired because I usually was.
So yeah, I guess I need to mentally readjust here because I always think of it as the Greg Wiseman, show. So one of the things that fascinates me about Gargoyles and the 65 episodes, I mean, I realized that there was this thing called the Goliath Chronicles that came out later, but nobody was really involved with that worked on the original show, and it's kind of like it's an add-on. So there's 65 episodes of Gargoyles. It seems far more cohesive than any other cartoon that I've ever seen, where sometimes things would come out in later episodes that was like, oh, this line from like 40 episodes ago actually means something because now we're dealing with it here. So I guess my question is, was there a thought put into this is an arc that we're telling, and here's sort of like an outline of what the show is going to be about?
Sometimes, and sometimes it was serendipity. I mean, the whole Owen is Puck thing. Greg tells the story. For some reason, he keeps putting Lydia Morano in the room with us. She was not. It was just Greg and I talking, and we did actually look at each other at the same moment and say, holy crap, Owen is Puck. And we were dancing around. We were so excited. And other times, a line in a show would stick in Greg's head. And he would say, oh, we're doing this script now over here. We could call back to that by developing this or that. Because I will be quite honest, I do not do that. Once I write a script, it's done. It's gone. I usually don't even watch the episode. Their entire series I have never seen any episodes of. Conan and the Young Warriors, I story edited, which embarrassingly has a character that an executive insisted on naming Brynne. So now I'm story editing a show with a character named after me. But I'm good at continuity. So if Greg wanted to do something in an episode that directly contradicted something somebody said in a previous one, I would remember that and say, no, we can't do that unless we explain why. But I think that he lived and breathed Gargoyles every minute of every day while the show was on, while we were working on it. I don't think he thought about anything else. I really don't.
Did you have input? Because, I mean, you wrote a good number of episodes. You also story edited a good number of episodes. So did you have input into the direction of either character arcs or the overall story?
I tried. Sometimes it was successful, and sometimes it was me and Greg running through the halls at Disney screaming obscenities at each other.
Do you have anything specific that you remember that's kind of like, this was my idea that I wanted to get into Gargoyles?
Not an idea as such, because I wouldn't have been proprietary about that. If you like wanting Barbara Gordon to have been stronger, okay, I didn't get my way, but I'm not going to hate anybody for the rest of my life because of it or anything like that. I'm not going to feel slighted. I'm not going to take it personally. It's just the television is collaborative. But Mark of the Panther, Lydia did a ton of research to make sure that we knew what Indian tribe or tribal groups we were dealing with, to make sure we told their story accurately, to make sure that we were respectful and that we didn't just make stuff up. And Greg took the outline after she wrote it. I polished it. I turned it in, and he threw the entire thing out and made up his own story. And I was livid, because this is going out with my name on it and with Lydia's name on it. And it's disrespectful to just throw stuff in there. And you'll see on fan sites them talking about, oh, they mixed Hopi and Navajo, and the writers couldn't possibly have known any better in the 90s. It's like, excuse me. It was a lot harder to do research in the 90s because the internet wasn't what it is now, but we sure did research. We absolutely did. We had access to all kinds of things. Libraries existed back then when the dinosaurs were around.
There were libraries before the internet, so research was still a thing.
Well, and because Michael was a member of the Writers Guild, because he also wrote live action stuff, the Writers Guild had these panels of experts on call that if for any reason, while I was on Dinosaurs, I needed a paleontologist, I could call one up, and she or he would give me 20 minutes of their time to answer a question. They were lawyers, doctors, policemen, airline pilots. Awesome. It was incredible. And they did it for free just because they liked to talk about their field, and they liked animation or whatever, television writing, and they liked helping creatives, and it was great. So, but yeah, Mark of the Panther was a real turning point.
You wrote 2 episodes that are kind of very Hudson focused, and Hudson didn't normally get a lot of development. I feel like Long Way Till Morning, and then oh crap, I forget the second one, but it's the one where Hudson has to say that he's, that he can't read.
Long Way to Morning and A Lighthouse in the Sea of Time.
A Lighthouse in the Sea of Time. Thank you.
Those are my 2 favorite episodes that I wrote. And Lighthouse in the Sea of Time is the second time I got screamed at by Disney lawyers.
Oh. Why were you screamed at?
The poem, A Lighthouse in the Sea of Time, came from a book written by Barbara Tuchman. And the Disney lawyers wanted me to get permission to use it. So I tracked down where Barbara Tuchman had lived on this tiny island somewhere off the coast of this country, I think, maybe New England. I don't remember. But I actually found a number for the Tuchman residence and called and got, she had herself had passed by that time, but I got a maid or a nurse or somebody saying that Dr. Tuchman was having his afternoon rest, but at 4:00 he would be up for a cocktail. And if I had the attorneys call back then, he would talk to them. So I told the Disney attorneys what they needed to do. And apparently Dr. Tuchman is a rich, cranky old man who gave them a really hard time. And so they called me into the office and screamed at me not to make them talk to cranky old men. And I was like, you're Disney lawyers. You're afraid of a 90-year-old man on an island somewhere. Grow up. So that's the main thing I learned about Disney lawyers is if you yell back, they buckle.
You mentioned that those are your two favorite stories. So why are those your two favorite stories?
I like a good, clean story.
Mm.
I like a beginning, middle, end. I want it to move like a train on fire. I want every scene to inevitably lead into the next scene. I don't want detours. And I did everything I could to make Long Way to Morning work like that. I like a ticking clock. I like a definite deadline at the end. I like high stakes. So to me, anytime you're writing animation or television or a movie or anything, unless you're doing everything yourself, it's collaborative. But I think that particular episode is the most purely mine of any animated episodes I'd ever written.
Was there anything specific about Hudson that interested you, or was that just you just happened to write two Hudson-centric stories?
Well, I loved Ed Asner, and I was only approaching 40 or in my 40s, but was already starting to see how people are treated when they get older. And I wanted everyone to remember that Hudson was the leader of the clan and that he was this warrior who had this incredible skill set, and that there are ways of looking at the world that are different from young people to old people. I mean, they just are. It's one of the most frustrating things for me, especially dealing with politics, is that when you get older, it doesn't mean you're a better person automatically. It doesn't mean you have a better perspective or understanding. But when you have been through the same emotional situation 17 times, you have a different perspective on it than someone who's facing it for the second time. And there is absolutely no way to tell that to someone who is 30. And when I was 30, I would not have heard it either. So I just wanted to, I wasn't even, that point hadn't really coalesced in my mind where it is now 20, 30 years later. But that's where I was starting to head, is how does aging change the way you see the world?
So Lighthouse on the Sea of Time is very much a story with an overt message, which Gargoyles didn't go into very often. There were a few with stories with overt messaging. A lot of cartoons did that a lot. Gargoyles didn't. So how do you feel about messaging within cartoon stories, and how do you handle that with telling a, sort of juggling, like I have to tell like an interesting story, but also trying to put in like sort of like a message for children in there as well?
Well, the first script I ever wrote for He-Man, I put a moral at the end because I thought that's how you wrote for children, because I'd never written a word in my life for anybody, but I thought that's what you did. And Mattel went, oh, now we can say this is not just a commercial. Look, there's the moral. So that's on me. That's all the morals tacked on the end. That's on me. That is on me.
Yeah, so many shows would do like the after the show thing of here's the moral message from the characters, you know?
Yep. That's on me. That's my fault. So putting the message in, I feel the best way to put a message in is to just let the action and the dialogue and the plot illustrate it. So it would never have occurred to me in a million years to have anybody say, I hope nobody said it in the script, what do you mean you can't read? That's stupid. Everybody should read. I wanted there to be a reason for him to want to read. Also, it wasn't until after the show was completely finished and it had aired that I woke up in the middle of the night and went, wait a minute. How does a blind person teach a sighted person to read words on a page? How does that even work? So fortunately, nobody ever asks that. So we got away with that one.
Right.
But yeah, I think that rather than trying to shoehorn a message into a story, you think about what message you want to convey, and then you figure out how the story can do that by itself.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Robbins had been sighted and had lost his sight. So theoretically,
Right.
if he found a book that he knew by heart, he could tell us.
He could also possibly done like the Helen Keller thing where
Mm.
a letter that looks like this and then trace an A on the palm. I mean, there are ways it could work, but
Yes.
never occurred to either of us.
Yeah, I'm inclined to defend Gargoyles, so I'll come up with a reason it makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and it's not the fault of Gargoyles. That's all on me.
Mm.
If I missed that point, that is my fault.
One of the interesting things about Gargoyles are the antagonists in Gargoyles, who I feel like are far more developed than most animated shows had for their, sort of villain. And you got to write for, you got to write for Xanatos, Demona, Jackal, Macbeth. So what do you think about the villains in Gargoyles? And was there any particular one that you thought was more interesting than the others? Or antagonists, I should say, rather than villains, because they're not all villains per se.
No, I was obviously Demona. Rich white men don't do anything for me. And so it's probably good that I didn't know anything about Elon Musk when we were writing Gargoyles, because that would have been another battle royale every day. I would not have allowed Xanatos to have a single defining good quality. I could not have done it. But yeah, Demona. Demona was more interesting to me. I couldn't care less about Jackal or the Pack or any of those guys. If I wrote for them, it's because that's the assignment I was given. But Demona was fascinating. And Macbeth, okay. He was okay, but it was mostly Demona because she was so complex.
Mm-hmm. Well, you wrote City of Stone, which may be the 4 best episodes of animation, in my opinion, that have ever been created.
Thank you. Is that the one where they change back and forth from? No, that's the Mirror where they change back and forth.
Yeah, so City of Stone is the one where Demona casts a spell over all of New York that causes humans to turn to stone at night. And so she goes around smashing all the human statues at night. So mass murder on kids' television, which was also kind of like amazing.
Well, that was me by the end of my career. There were a lot of things like in the Batman episode with Hardak where the people are being replaced by androids. I wanted to start that episode with Batman chasing somebody and he comes around the corner just in time for a little girl to be stepping on the sidewalk and he clips her. And he leaps out of the Batmobile and he runs to her and he picks her up and her head falls off. And it's all sparking wires. They wanted nothing to do with that.
That one I can see like a little more why they might be a little hesitant with that.
I thought it was going to be great, but yeah, they didn't want anything to do with that. But so that's City of Stone. That was me getting a lot of that frustration out.
But it's also the one that flashed back to Demona and Macbeth and their story throughout the centuries and how that had all played out as far as why they were linked together and how they had each betrayed the other, kind of. Demona was anticipating Macbeth betraying her, so she betrayed him first. And that caused this cycle of violence between the two of them. But because they're bound together, they live through eternity hating each other, but without any ability to really do anything about it.
Right.
So one of the things that I'm curious about was how much of that was handed to you as we need these beats to play out, and how much of that was you putting the storyline in for that.
I think any time Macbeth or any of that stuff was involved, Greg knew what he wanted to see. And then I just had to figure out how to make it work. And then I also tried to take whatever I was told to have Demona do and make it make sense to me, because I did not want her to be just some crazy woman. She was making bad choices, but she was making bad choices because of who she is. She wasn't just run around being evil. Because that's boring to write.
No. So the Shakespearean allusions, which the show had already done Puck before this, but Macbeth, obviously, there's a lot of callbacks to Shakespeare's Macbeth within the story.
Yeah.
Was the Shakespeare, was that coming from you, or was that another Greg thing where he wanted there to be?
That was all Greg. He's a Shakespeare buff. I was very suspicious of Shakespeare because when I read Romeo and Juliet for the first time, I was like, wait a minute, this girl, this is a manipulative, crazy valley girl, and Romeo is playing with her. He doesn't love her. He spoke to her in the same words that he used for the girlfriend he just tossed over for her. He's a boy toy. She's a valley girl and he's a boy toy. Why is this the greatest love story ever told? I don't get it. So I just assumed that Shakespeare is not for me. So Greg kept throwing that stuff in, and I was like, well, okay. Lydia would go look it up and be like, okay, here's Macbeth. Here's what he does. Here's what he thinks. Here's who. I mean, I'd read the play, but like I said, after seeing that most of the rest of the world thought Romeo and Juliet were aspirational, I was like, whoa, I really don't get this. I must not understand these plays.
I'm there with you on Romeo and Juliet. I do like Shakespeare's, a lot of the other Shakespeare plays, but I agree with you that Romeo and Juliet, and I think a lot of people misread, because I think Shakespeare's intention was kind of to show the folly of these two kids who are doing really dumb things. I don't think it was meant to be, oh, so romantic.
No, I don't either. So he would want all the Shakespeare stuff in, and then Lydia and I would have to find a way to make it work.
I will tell you, I spoke to John Rhys Davies last year because he was at a con locally. And most everyone wanted him to sign something related to Lord of the Rings because he was Gimli in Lord of the Rings.
Yes, which I love.
But I wanted him to sign a picture of Macbeth. And he saw that and he was instantly like, the Macbeth in Gargoyles was more accurate than Shakespeare's version. So, just something for you there, that he really appreciated the backstory that you wrote for me.
When I got to the recording studio, he was there either warming up or doing a different episode that had Macbeth in it, not mine, because at Disney, story editors had to be there at the recording sessions. So when I walked in, I thought it was Sean Connery. I was so excited. So he came out and, we said hi, and I was like, oh my God, I thought you were Sean Connery. So he rushed at me, picked me up, threw me over his shoulder, and ran outside to the parking lot with me. And I was no lightweight back then either. This is a strong man. So we got to the parking lot and I said, now what? Now what are you going to do with me? He was like, oh, I guess we'll go back inside. And we did. And he did a great Macbeth, and he was always fun. But yeah, that moment in the parking lot, I was like, you had no plan. You had no plan here.
The voice cast on that whole show was remarkable. And much like you, I was so amazed at how much like Sean Connery he made his Macbeth sound.
And the little recording session that we went to, there were lots of big movie stars who went to do ADR and stuff. It could have been Sean Connery, but yeah, no, he was great fun, and the cast was great, and they were absolutely wonderful to work with.
Yeah, Macbeth, I was always so enamored with that character from the very first appearance. And part of that is the writing, and part of that is the work that John Rhys Davies put in. So to me, like, Macbeth was always such a fascinating character, because he wasn't, that's why I say antagonist, because Macbeth wasn't a villain. Right. Macbeth, sometimes because of his vendetta with Demona, would do things that were bad to the Gargoyles, but he bore the Gargoyles no ill will. It was Demona specifically that he bore ill will towards. Exactly. And so I always find him fascinating. So we talked a little bit, and I know that you said, like, when you were working on He-Man, at the beginning of your career, you didn't think about boyish show, girl show, that kind of stuff. But after 15 years or so working on animation, I'm sure you were aware of the realities of just how things are marketed, and toys are pushed to one or the other, etc. But one of the things that I found kind of interesting about Gargoyles is the fact that it is very much a show that, despite the fact that it's very male-dominated in the casting. You know, we have Elisa, and later we have Angela as main female characters, and of course Demona as a villain, but you know, it's still predominantly a male show. Was there a conscious effort to sort of pitch it as more broadly, or do you think that's just a natural outgrowth of people working on it that weren't as concerned with the focusing on?
No, I think it was just those of us all working on it just don't think that way in terms of, I mean, it's always referred to as boys action adventure animation. That's what it's called in the industry. But I never, fine if you want to market that way, but I'm writing girl characters. That's just the way it's going to be. And so we didn't. Greg has both a daughter and a son, I believe. I think he only has 2 kids. But we never talked about stuff like that. Boys won't watch it, girls won't watch it, boys won't like this, girls won't do that. I don't think we ever really thought about that. But most of the people writing, Greg's a little younger, but most of us came of age in the 60s and 70s. Free to Be You and Me, and, all that stuff. So we didn't buy into the same boy-girl splits, I guess, that the marketing people were looking at. And I never met, the whole time I was on Gargoyles, I never talked to, until the very end, I never talked to an executive at all. Or certainly not a marketing person.
So there's been talk recently about bringing Gargoyles back in the live action reboot sort of show. Nothing concrete. It seems to be a lot of rumors, like Jordan Peele's name was thrown around as somebody who was interested. So I'm just curious what you think about Gargoyles in live action, if you think that that's something that you would think would be like a good idea.
If they get the right person, it could be great. I mean, they won't come to me. They won't come to anyone. We will have nothing to do with it. And no matter what they do, whether it's, good, bad, or ugly, it won't change what we did. What we put out still exists. You can still watch it. You can still buy it. You can still find it. So if they can find someone to put it together who will do it justice, I'll be thrilled for them. And if they give it to Zack Snyder, you will see me on the news.
Oh, don't put that thought in my head. Oh my God. Yes. Goliath, my nuanced hero character who's prone to fits of passion, but is basically like a good, honorable guy, will just be this toxic male, like, I'm tough and I like to tear things apart. Yeah. Oh God, I don't want to.
I mean, I think one of the things I think that is a problem with people like Zack Snyder is I don't think his movie education started soon enough. I mean, I have always loved the Universal horror movies. And one of the first things that Michael and I bonded over, and he gave me a really intensive film education and an understanding of the nuts and bolts of animation, which everything I know now is obsolete. But Goliath, anytime I think of that kind of scary anti-hero hero person, it goes back to the original King Kong or the French Beauty and the Beast. I mean, King Kong, he was scary and everything, but he wasn't being terrible because he got pleasure out of it, And so that's how I look at every villain. What would King Kong do? Or Godzilla, in later movies, when they kind of made Godzilla into the hero. I love that stuff. The original Frankenstein will break your heart. When he picks up the little girl and throws her in the water, holy crap.
Well, yeah, I mean, the whole point of Gargoyles is that everyone humans look at them and see monsters when they're people. I mean, they're sentient beings that have the same feelings that we do.
Yep.
And so they're not monstrous in the sense of horrific and angry and want to hurt you. They just look different.
Right. And that's a kind of, I mean, the Elephant Man and
Hmm.
even Boo Radley, you
Hmm.
know,
Oh,
and
that's a
these are
good
all
one.
the
Yeah.
things these are all the things that Michael and I grew up with, and that
Hmm.
informed a lot of his writing, and it definitely informs mine.
So with the love that Gargoyles has, I mean, Gargoyles had its own convention for years. I mean, it is clearly a series that had lots of love and people are very devoted to it. Why do you think when Disney has been so big on marketing the things that it owns and redoing them for years, why do you think Disney has sat on Gargoyles for so long?
It was not a hit. It has great, great, great fan love. But when we were first on, we were constantly preempted for the O.J. Simpson trial.
Mm.
So there was a huge executive turnover going on at Disney at the time. So we really didn't have a champion. There
Mm.
was no one there to speak up for us, no one there really to be the adult in the room when we needed one. And on the other hand, that gave us an awful lot of freedom. So it's good and bad, but it didn't turn a profit. They were, if it had become huge in the moment, like Turtles or like He-Man, then we'd still be seeing new episodes and we'd be seeing live action and we'd be seeing a movie and all this other stuff, but it didn't make them a profit.
Mm. Yeah, it just seems like with them mining their IP so much these days
Yes.
that it would just seem like this is something that is such a following behind it and probably bigger than at the time when it was aired. I would think that
Oh,
they
I
would be,
definitely.
yeah, that they would be like, this is something that we should move on. I hear that on Disney Plus it's doing well. Again, I don't have, this is rumor and hearsay and
Yeah.
whatnot.
But also, if you're sitting in a room full of executives who are not writers and not artists and a bunch of money guys and hedge fund guys, they're going to look at this and they're going to be like, well, this isn't, there's a ton of characters.
Hmm.
There's the Elisa Goliath romance, which in the present political climate would not be easy to sell. There's Shakespeare.
Elisa herself is as a Native American slash African American, a woman is probably hard to sell.
Yep. Well, and even if Sally Richardson were young enough to still play the role,
Mm.
this woman is an executive producer on amazing things. I think she was one of the producers on The Gilded Age. I
Mm.
mean, she's incredible. She's doing amazing stuff. So she's not going to, even if she was available, she wouldn't do it. But yeah, it didn't make them a big profit right from the gate. And it's complex and it's sophisticated. And I don't know that they could find anyone who could pitch it in a way that the people who say yes would understand.
Mm.
The time to have done that would have been probably during the height of Game of Thrones.
Mm. Yeah, I can see some synergy there.
Yeah.
So as we wind down here, are there any shows that you worked on that we haven't mentioned that you would like to just say like, oh, there was this other thing that I worked on that's really good that I had a good time working on? Any other like shout outs like that?
The one I always bring up is Potato Head Kids.
I never watched that.
You should. I wrote 2 episodes. One of them is Potato Head Pirates.
Ah.
So I really liked doing Phantom 2040.
Mm.
That was one of the most pleasant working experiences I have ever had. Gar and Judy Reeves Stevens would usually, I just like to be told, write a story about a mouse and I'll go do it and make sure it fits your show and your budget and everything else. But after my first script, they would break down the outline for me. So they would say, half a page, hit these 2 beats. Half a page, all this beat. Half a page, intro this character. And it completely freed me up to do whatever I wanted within that, because the stronger the scaffolding, the more durable the house. So that was that. It's a little known show. I do believe, and everybody runs around taking credit for anything, and I already have to make up for putting the morals at the end of the stories. I believe that the character of Dr. Jack, who was voiced by Mark Hamill, I believe that's what got him the job on Batman as the Joker. Now, my fella, Ken, who is an animation writer, as I said, and also teaches animation writing in the history of broadcast, says the timing doesn't work, that Batman would have come first. But I don't think so, because I was pregnant with my son Dashiell, a little bit pregnant with my son Dashiell during Phantom 2040, and very pregnant with him during Batman. In fact, I used to like to go into Marty Pasco's office and lie on his desk and pretend I was having contractions, because he would pull his shirt up over his head and scream like a little girl.
That seems mean.
Well, you would have had to have known Marty.
Okay.
He was wonderful. He was extremely neurotic, and sometimes it was healthy for him to have his buttons pushed.
Do you know if Phantom 2040 is streaming anywhere, or that it's accessible to watch anywhere?
I don't know.
Okay. Because that's another one I didn't see, but I was aware of its existence. So you've got me curious now. So I'll see if I can dig that up somewhere.
When Michael, and this is probably one of the stupidest moments in my career, I don't know, but when Michael was working at DreamWorks for Harv Bennett, I met Harv a couple times. And I guess he found me interesting. I don't know. But he called one night to say that he and a bunch of people, executives, were sitting around the dining room table, and they want to know what my name was, because they were all arguing that it was something different. And I told him about how many times I'd changed it and everything, and that was fine. And then he asked to see something I'd written. It's like, anyone with a brain, Harv Bennett has just asked to see something I've written, would have sat down, stayed up all night, and tailored something perfect for him. No, I gave him my Phantom 2040 script because I was so freaking proud of it. And I think if Batman scripts had existed then, I would have given him one of those, because he knew who Batman was. So he gave it back to Michael and said it was a great script, but I don't know who any of the characters are, so it doesn't really tell me anything about her. So that was probably a missed opportunity, but it validates my timeline.
Right. Well, and yeah, just because things were aired in a certain order doesn't mean that they were recorded or written in a certain order. So yeah, it's quite possible. Right. Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, just before we go, are there any other projects or anything you've written or worked on that you would like people listening to this to be aware of?
No, if you've got little kids, there is Weather Hunters, which is really cute and really informative and really fun. And really, Gargoyles pretty much was the end of my animation career. But the whole industry changed at the same time. Also, the other thing is, I know people get really upset about the idea that you age out of a business. But I am 68 years old. I just turned 68 on the 13th. And if I was a 25-year-old who had just been given her own show, would I look to hire someone old enough to be my grandmother, who has been friends with my bosses for 35 years and can do my job better than I can? Or am I going to hire my peers so we can all grow up together? So I know what I would do. I mean, you'd like to think you'd go to the old school people and garner all their wisdom, but they're a threat. If you can get one as a mentor in private, that's amazing. But it's a passing parade. I had my turn. So now it's somebody else's. If somebody liked what I did in the past and wanted me to do more, sure. I would come and I would be respectful and I would take notes and I would not be a pain in the butt. But I understand it. And it's not unfair. It's just the way life works.
Well, Brynne, I really appreciate the time that you've given today. We've almost gone double the time that I
know.
before, so
that's because I never shut up.
but it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed all your insights.
I did too. I love talking to you.
Talking about these shows that I've loved, throughout my life. So thank you for being on the 42 cast.
You are very welcome. And you tell your wife she's my kind of girl and we'll get together and watch something blow up sometime.
Okay. All right. I'll do that.
All right.
All right. Well, take care. And thank you for being on the 42 cast.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
You have been listening to the 42 cast, copyright 2026. Got a question for the ultimate answer? Contact us at everything@42cast.com. Theme music is Sharper Swords by Brandon Ellis. Check out more of his work at www.cityfires.com. The 42 cast is a proud member of the ESO network.
This has been a broadcast of the ESO Network. Be part of the crew and help support our shows by donating to our ESO Patreon or by shopping at the TeePublic store, which can all be found at www.esonetwork.com. The ESO Network, your station for all things geek.